Over the past few years, we've heard a lot about the connection between neuroscience and brain research and learning. It's interesting to me that we are just beginning to really understand how our brain and learning truly affects our teaching and how our teaching should reflect the knowledge that we gain from those two disciplines. When we take a look at how learning and the brain are connected, the thing that stuck out most to me was the idea of these three interconnected networks because I saw them in my mind as parallel to the three universal design for learning principles. And so the three universal design for learning principles are multiple means of representation, multiple means of engagement, and multiple means of demonstrating the knowledge that we have gained. And when I look at the three interconnected neural networks of recognition, strategic, and our affective network, I see that there are a lot of similarities between the principles and these networks. So our recognition network really focuses on the what of learning, or the content. It's designed to allow us to receive and analyze information. And then that to me is tied directly to our universal design for learning principle of multiple means of representation, because not all of our students, as we know, are visual learners, nor are all of our students auditory learners, nor are all of our students kinesthetic learners. We have a wide range. And so that to me says that each of our students' recognition networks, although they all have them, may be designed very differently. And so making sure that we have multiple means for them to recognize, or multiple means of representation for them to gain that knowledge, is extremely important. Likewise, our strategic network is the network within our brain that allows us to plan and execute actions. It's the how of learning. How am I going to gain this information? How am I going to interact with this information to make it meaningful and last for me? And so that, to me, ties directly to the universal design for learning principle of multiple means of engagement. Because not all of our students plan and execute actions or in the same way. We don't engage with material in the same way. Some of our students would much rather have hands-on projects. Some of our students would much rather read a story or an essay or a paragraph. And some of our students would rather just sit and listen to a lecture. And so looking at that variety and the means that our students engage with information, to me, is important because that's one of our key networks within our mind for learning. And I find that they're not going to be the same from student to student. And so it's important that we take a look at having a variety and diversity when we're trying to allow our students to plan and execute information, that we're not expecting them to all conform to the same exact sort of template. And our affective network was interesting to me because it's not so much the demonstration of our knowledge, which is the third UDL principle, but what it does do is it's our why of learning. Why on earth do I need to know what we're doing? It allows us to evaluate and set priorities, so it allows us to say, this is the information I need to know, this information is extraneous and I don't really need to know that. And it really makes us effective learners in the sense that the hope would be that if we understand why we need to learn this information, that we're going to take it seriously and we're going to be able to categorize and sort of retain that information much stronger than information that we don't see the benefit in learning. And that affective network and that concept of why really resonated with me in the fact that we always have our administrators in the state telling us that at any point in time that they walk into our classrooms, our students should be able to answer the question, why are we learning this? One of the key focuses that I wanted to look at was the connections between simply our classroom environment and memory and learning. There's a huge push in the district for differentiated instruction, unit-based design, and really looking at standards-based learning. And I think that one of the easiest ways to take a look at that or to begin that process is to look at our classroom environment. And the reason that I say that is because learning to me is not just academically based. It's a combination of academics and social emotional um, strategies that all of our students need to learn. And I think that there should be an interconnected realm of social emotional learning and academic learning in every classroom. And I think that it's important as educators that we ensure that we're not just pushing academics, but that we're really looking at students as a whole. And what I found interesting was that neuro research is supporting the idea of a supportive and engaging classroom environment or a sense of a learning community as much more likely to allow our students to learn and gain information in comparison to a classroom where we're simply drilling information and there's not really that sense of belonging or that sense of purpose. Um, and so I pulled out these 4 quotes or these 4 key points from the articles that we looked at for neuro research. And it was interesting to me, the first one, when they talk about scrubbing the joy and comfort from a classroom, that we truly distance our students from effective information processing and long-term memory storage. And I find that to be so true that oftentimes that when we are frantic and we're pushing and we're pushing and we're pushing, that our students are able to retain information for a short period of time, but they really, really don't build those connections and those neurological connections that allow them to store that information for a longer period of time. And in fact, I find that when learning is not fun and our classroom environment is not one that supports a sense of community and a sense of compassion, that our students are actually bored, anxious, and anything but engaged. And so I think that it's interesting that we always sort of hear from the state that it's important for us to develop a learning community and to tie students' learning activities to their own experiences and interests. But I also find it very cool that neuro research is now saying that when we engage students and when we allow students to make mistakes and to feel supported within a classroom, and when we tie our students' lives and interests to our curriculum, that we really are allowing them to learn more effectively than when we sort of just ignore those things that sometimes don't seem as important. They're actually very pivotal in designing learning activities and curriculum materials. And then I also thought about this because the 4th statement talks about connections and aha moments. And I think to myself, I was thinking to myself that some of the best moments in my educational career were when my students, you could see that light bulb go over my students' heads and they were like, oh, this is why this works. Or, oh, this is how you do this. And those aha moments are such a strong, those are the things that stick out so much in my mind. Those are the strong moments in my mind that I really feel as though designing an environment where we support these discovery moments, these self-discovery moments, these aha moments with our students is so vital. And it was so reassuring to me to know that brain research has shown that higher cognition levels, so Bloom's taxonomy, and those higher thinking questions, making connections and experiencing those aha moments are really coming from environments, classroom environments, where our students are having fun, where they feel comfortable, where they are enjoying themselves, where our learning activities aren't paper and pencil based, but they may involve technology or they might involve project-based learning. And it was very reassuring to me to know that research is behind me when I say and I push to keep these types of activities and these types of environments alive in our schools today. So of course, data. So I did think it was important to note sort of how we know that comfort levels, engagement levels, and the idea of joy and compassion in the classroom truly has a positive correlation to our students' learning. And so there were two main studies that I pulled out. There was neuroimaging and measurement of brain chemical transmitters revealed that students' comfort levels can influence information transmission and storage within the brain, which was very interesting to me that we were able to measure the difference between an environment where students felt comfortable and our students were having fun with their learning experiences, and in classrooms where that was not happening, and that there truly was a difference in the ability of students to transfer and store information in their brain. And then the second study was a cognitive study that focused on the effect that stress, boredom, confusion, low motivation, and anxiety, either singularly or in combination, interfere with the learning process and interfere with our students' ability to gain new information, make connections, and then apply those connections and that information to practical applications later in life. Um, I think that those two studies really show how important designing our classroom environment can be, and how truly effective designing an appropriate classroom environment can be to maximize our students' learning. And so what on earth does this mean in practice? So it's really interesting to me when we get all of this wonderful information, or we read about all of this research and all of this information, and then when we walk away from it, we really have no idea what on earth that means in our day-to-day lives, and really what pieces we should pull out to make sure we focus on in our day-to-day teaching careers. So I really liked this acronym, the RAD acronym, um, which really is three concepts that we should keep in mind when planning our lessons and designing learning activities for students. The first bullet point, which is talking about the reticular activating system, really focuses on the idea that novelty promotes information transmission. So newness and constantly presenting students with new means of engaging with learning or new content material promotes information transmission, and also promotes the building of connections and the storage of that information in our long-term memory. So when we design learning activities, we take a look at the idea of, is this something we've already done? Is there a better way that I can present this to students? Is there a new way that might be more effective? And so I always think about that in an interesting way. When I look at teaching my students about a concept that can somewhat otherwise be tedious and boring. So say, for instance, addition. If I only taught students addition for weeks, using paper-based pencils, paper-based and paper and pencil-based activities, it would be an extremely monotonous and boring experience for them. But when I incorporate the use of an iPad and explain everything, which would allow them to explain to their colleagues how they got their answer. Or if I used a smartboard with Classroom Suite and they practiced using a number line and solving addition problems in front of their whole class, and they take turns and they have that built-in support and scaffolding. Or if I ask them to use hopping number dots, like those gym dots that we use to mark like bases or spots. They do sell some that have sort of addition and subtraction signs. And so to really have them hands-on build those and then hop across their dots to find the sum. So taking a look at how I'm teaching the same concept, but I'm teaching it with novelty. I'm teaching it in 4 different ways, but I'm accomplishing the exact same goal. So that's the first component. The A in the RAD acronym focuses on the amygdala's affective filter, or in more simple terms, that stress-free classrooms propel data through the affective filter. In other words, if you're in a classroom that is unstressful, you are going to more effectively allow that data or knowledge, that content, to pass through your amygdala's filter. So it's going to get to you. Whereas when you're stressed out, you have a much harder time allowing that information and content to pass through your filter. So this, to me, really focused on sort of the idea of when we're planning our lessons, sort of looking at not necessarily errorless learning, but really looking at the idea that we want to design activities that push our students but are not so challenging for our students that they're unable to be successful and they're going to get stressed out and really freak out, because as soon as they hit that level, they're not learning or gaining any of the information we would like them to anyway. And then I also thought about the idea of the connection between meeting our students' social emotional needs as a whole and the idea of removing that stress that might be happening outside of our classroom and allowing them to know that within the classroom we are here and we provide those scaffolding and supports that they will need to be successful. And the last component of the RAD acronym stands for dopamine, which is a neurochemical that's linked with pleasurable associations. And so the idea of this neurochemical is that we want our students to have fun. So learning activities and lessons that allow our students to have fun are going to release more dopamine and allow our students to have this great positive connection between learning material, any material, and pleasure. So having that positive connection and allowing learning to be fun and an engaging, exciting activity is something that's going to make the capturing and storage of knowledge and information much more effective for our students. And so I really liked this acronym because it took into account all of these different research studies and really put it straightforward. So what we're really looking at is novelty, designing a classroom that's stress-free, that has scaffolding and supports for all of our students so that they can feel successful, and thinking about pleasurable learning activities that allow our students to make the connection between pleasure and learning so that they're more apt and more likely to want to learn material as we present it to them. And so then there's always this idea of, so what? And why do I need to even care about neural research? And so I wanted to answer this sort of key question of how does knowledge of research make us better educators? And I just pulled out 3 points. It's actually directly from one of the articles that we read for class. But it talks about that professionalism is, and to be a professional educator is, to know about research-based in the research so that we can make research-based decisions. And I loved the idea that if you don't know why you do what you do, why am I doing it this way, then it's not purposeful and it's not really professional. As a professional educator, I should be able to say, I teach this way because research shows that fun learning activities, hands-on learning activities increase student learning. I teach this way because da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And then I did get a kick out of the last point that I pulled out, in the sense that the idea that the reason that you teach this way is that it is your collected and refined wisdom. That's why I teach this way. I know that this is effective teaching. And I loved that that the article stated that there was nothing wrong with that, but that at times collected and refined wisdom has also led to some bad teaching. And so it's not enough anymore for us to say that we're teaching this way because we know that that's effective teaching. It really needs to have this blend of scientific research that demonstrates support for brain development, learning connections, and connection development of information connections, and storage of that information in short-term and long-term memory. So there's got to be an objective component to the reason why we teach the way we teach. So this is my short sort of rundown of neuroscience and learning and the connections that are meaningful to today's educators. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me, and I will be happy to provide more resources to you.